Good evening, everybody. Let's all stand, please, except for Marcia. We want to welcome you tonight to our hot topic discussion on Project 2025. I know some of you might be feeling out of sorts because we asked you to sit kind of together and not spread out, but we're doing that so we can have direct conversation with you. We're going to open up in a word of prayer, and then you know how we do. We just kind of do a quick fellowship with everybody. Not long, because we want to go ahead and jump in. So give you a minute to greet everybody, and then we'll have our conversation. So God, we honor you tonight. We thank you for this time and opportunity. Bless our discussion tonight. May your spirit be with us, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, let's go ahead and show some appreciation to people who are in the room tonight.
That's Tracy. She just had a birthday, right?
Hey, Bill, can you bring the lights up just a little bit? That's good right there. Now we can see.
This bigger than our whole church. I'm serious. I'm serious. When I preach, this is who I preach to. And that's when they showed up, because I was preaching.
All right, let's take our seats, please. Do we have any visitors that are with us tonight, non-Ivy family? If you are a guest with us tonight, can you please just stand? We can just see if we have any guests tonight that are with us. All right, thank you, JD, for being here. In my introductions, I'm going to introduce those two who are standing as well. But again, tonight, we know that the election is coming up. We know that we have a responsibility. When we say we, I mean leadership in our community have a responsibility to educate people to be aware of what's really on the ballot. And so we're excited tonight to have this conversation about Project 2025 and what its implications are. And so what we decided to do tonight is, instead of me doing it, because I'm not the expert in it, I wanted to invite someone who has studied it, who is in the political arena, somebody who is having to deal with some of these things now in office and can speak intelligently to us about these issues. And so I want to introduce to some. She's family here to us. She's been here a lot, and I want to give her a big shout out because in order for her to do this tonight, she was in Richmond earlier today. And so she had to rearrange her schedule. When I asked her, could you please come and do this session, she said, I'll do it without hesitating. But she had to rearrange her schedule for her to be here tonight. So this is Delegate Marcia Price. Come on, y'all give her a big round of applause. Come on, yeah, let's show her some love for rearranging her schedule to be here. And so her assistant is here. Tempest is here. Wave your hand, Tempest. Thank you for being here tonight also. And then Mom is here with her as well, Mother Price. Also, Mom, thank you for being here also. And so we appreciate you. So what we plan to do tonight is, because Project 2025 actually, y'all, is very, very extensive. It covers a lot of different subject areas. And in all likelihood, we're not going to be able to cover all of the subject areas. But what we will do is have some conversation around things that we believe are meaningful to us that you need to know about as we go forward. And so we'll start off the conversation. And then, as you can see, there are two mics. We will have a question and answer portion. If you have a question, we need you to come to the mics, state your name, and then briefly ask your question. And we'll do that a little bit later on as we continue on in this conversation. Now, we are not streaming this, and so what we have done is that Sia is also a part of one of the co-hosts of our radio show, the Crew Radio Show. And so when we started off our season, which is this Friday, by the way, at 6 p.m., we actually started our first 2 shows in this season devoted to Project 2025. So if you could put that on the screen again, Bill, the ways in which they can see it. We want to make sure that you are aware of the opportunities. It's going to be Friday on the radio at 6 p.m. on WHOV 88.1. And then it's also a podcast where you can get it on YouTube, Facebook, or Instagram, and you can access those shows. So if you like what you heard tonight, or maybe you missed out and maybe you wanted to go back and hear something else, you can check it out starting on Friday at 6 o'clock. So if y'all want to get your phones out, take a shot of that on the screen of how you can access it. This Friday and next Friday, we're devoting our first 2 shows to Project 2025. So you can tell family members and friends, listen, you need to get more information. So we got all of that out the way. I'm ready now to start this discussion and dialogue. And Delegate Price, thank you, first of all.
Before we start.
Yes.
Okay. So I just had a moment and I just remember it and I got a little emotional, so I got to say it.
Okay.
So the last time I was on this stage, you all were doing something major and giving money to then Mayor Price toward the Early Childhood Development Center.
Yes.
And some of you all knew that something was going on with my family, and you all prayed for us. And my mother is here and doing well, and we want to say thank you for those prayers. Keep praying, and she's going to keep fighting. But just wanted to absolutely thank you, because we do feel like y'all are family, and thank you so much, because it just hit me, and
Yep.
I gotta say thank you.
Absolutely.
Say thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay.
That's what family do, right? All right, so let's have this conversation, and we've had it offline. We've talked about this before. We've done the show already. Project 2025 is not new, okay? So if people are thinking that it's new, I want you to kind of start from the beginning, kind of give people some real background on where this came from, who's behind it, when did it start, so you can catch us up on that.
Yeah. So Project 2025 in and of itself is a 900+ page document. And on either the front or the back of the handout that you have, that's the first link that's listed. So you can go see that in their own words. This is not a secret. I'm not spilling any beans on anything. Those 900 pages are available to you. But the title is a misnomer, because even though the project is for 2025, it didn't just start. A lot of the things that we are going to discuss have been in motion and in process for a decade. But what the Heritage Foundation, which is a conservative think tank, what they did with about 100 other organizations that think alike with them, they got together and they decided, well, we have shared values, we have shared concerns, let's create a playbook such that we have all 3 branches of government in position in order to enact this vision that we have based on our values. And so we're gonna flesh out what some of those values are, but this is not anything that any of the current candidates came up with, not even the current congressional representatives or even the Supreme Court. But it does require the participation of each of those 3 branches of government in order for the vision to be enacted upon. And so I know that you all know in my work I am very partisan, but today I'm here. And I know where I am. I'm in a church, and we're not going to get no church in trouble. And if you have a question, I can either give you unbiased information with my editorial at the end. But those links that you have on that is in their words. The Heritage Foundation, their link is also up there. You can see some of their background. That is not the camp where I reside, but I can talk about it. So please don't feel like you have to only ask me questions from a certain perspective. If you have a question, please feel free.
And I think it's important that we kind of define terms,
Yes.
right? Because conservative and liberal is used a lot.
And it's a spectrum.
It is a spectrum. It's used a lot in the political arena, but it's also used a lot in churches. Mm-hmm. And so what people need to understand is that there's conservative thought, usually politically. When you hear that term, conservative thought means we want to keep things how they are, how they've been. And that generally means that it's leaning toward a Republican stance. On the other hand, when you hear liberal, the thought is that we want to see something different, maybe make some changes. Maybe how things were is not working for how things are now. That typically usually leans toward Democrat. So I want to make sure everybody understands that, because even when you talk about churches, there are conservative churches in thinking biblically, keeping things the way they are. There are liberal-minded churches or progressive-minded churches who think differently about how things need to be. And so when you talked about the Heritage Foundation and the conservative ideals that this think tank got together, you could also argue that churches were a part of, some church leaders were a part of that discussion, correct?
Absolutely. And so when you think of traditional values, and again, with it being on a spectrum, right? So I get called all kinds of things like radical. Well, radical is a relative opinion, right? If I feel like children should be fed and you call me radical, it might be saying more about you than me, right? So it depends on who's usually using the term, but the Heritage Foundation calls themselves conservative. So that is their self-embraced term for that. And then those about 100 organizations and thought leaders and authors, and a lot of them come from with religious spaces where I would associate I was going to say fetishizing, but I think that's probably editorial, but a longing for times past. Right, like the country has gone too far in one way or the other, and we need to roll it back. So if you think about the nuclear family, and I'm saying this with no judgment, the nuclear family where the man goes outside of the home to work, the woman stays home, has children, takes care of the home, and that is the setup, right? So these are the values that a lot of the legislative policies embrace. And a lot of that is based off, letters to the Corinthians and the household codes within the New Testament. So there's an undercurrent of Christianity, but even within Christianity, Pastor, I would say we have to define our terms, because I'm an Episcopalian. You all are Baptist here.
I think so.
Right, because it's in the name. Look, yeah, I just want to make sure. Ivy Baptist, right?
Yeah,
but even within Baptist, I know that there are different, expressions of it.
There are.
But I would say one of the things that we can talk about is the intersections of how race interplays with other things.
Yes.
Because some of these authors didn't have none of y'all in mind when they were writing this Christian document.
Correct. And so I want to make sure we set that up, right? Because you may hear that there were some conservative religious groups that were a part of the Heritage Foundation, that was a part of creating Project 2025. Because that particular group of religious thinkers value and see the Bible a certain way. And it's also true that in this election season, you're going to have conservative Christians that may not agree with liberal Christians, and vice versa. And that's why for me here, I'm not trying to get in the game of conservative versus liberal. Our mandate here is kingdom. And then beyond that, then we have discussions about what we individually believe. But what we're not going to do is tear the church up over conservative versus liberal thinking. And so that's why I want to set this up and have this conversation like this first, because you are going to encounter people who say they love God, who read the Bible, but who think differently about Project 2025. That's just a fact. Now, having said that, let's have the conversation about let's because there are a lot of different areas that Project 2025 covers. I mean, just about everything that we deal with. Take us through, maybe for you, what are some of the, start at the top, what do you think is the most important thing that we need to know about as it relates to Project 2025?
So I honestly think it is the starting point of the conservative values of that nuclear family, because it seems like everything else kind of disseminates from that, where a man has a certain role, a child has a certain role, a woman has a certain role, and then we kind of go from there. What it does not seem to leave room for are the different ways that family shows up in the Black community. So when you have grandmamas taking care of grandbabies, when you have single parents, I know y'all have heard us talk on the show about that, right? And all of that, but however relationships begin or end, usually within our historic tradition, family is whoever needs help at the moment, right? And so what does having a family that looks different than the original idea from this document mean for you, and how can you interact with that? Not every woman that works wants to, but some of us have to, right? So like there's no question about that. So are we safe in the working environment when we show up, right? So these are some of the thoughts and things that come from that. But there are three main pillars, and one is, like I said, that the three branches of government interplay. Now, we're going to name those three. What are the three branches of government? Executive, and what does the executive do? They implement the laws, right? And so the executive branch is under the president and all of the cabinet secretaries and the departments. That's executive. What's the other? Legislative, and what do? They write and make the laws, get them passed. The president signs them, but the Congress and the House pass those laws. And then what's the third? Judicial, right? And so that's where our entire court system, all the way up to the Supreme Court system, goes. Now, I love that you all knew those answers, because that's what we all learned in civics. One of the main pillars about checks and balances that we may have learned years ago is being completely overhauled in this document, where all three, instead of having those checks and balances, come together to work for a common cause. And you end up, instead of a nice little diagram that we might remember on Schoolhouse Rock or something, you end up with like a big pool of people working towards something. So how you might end up with the Supreme Court case that basically said that, you know what, the federal departments, they kind of know what they're talking about, but it's actually going to be the courts that decide regulations. And then you look and you're like, well, none of you all are scientists, so how are you all going to decide what's better for the EPA, for our air, for our water, for our soil, right? But this is what one of the main pillars is. It is to get all three branches on the same train, toward the same vision, toward the same values. That, to me, is problematic, especially when I know I'm already not in the included group from where the document started. The second is under the executive branch, when we're talking about the president and all the secretaries, those departments, whether we're talking about the folks that handle weather, whether we're talking about whoever missed the Boar's Head Inn situation when they weren't doing, I guess, inspections, and now people died from eating that meat, right? That's part of the executive branch. One of the stated pillars of Project 2025 is to uproot all of the federal workers and put them through a political litmus test in order to either be rehired for their job or hired for their job. I told y'all I'm partisan. That gave me pause. Because when I go to my doctor, I do not ask him or her if they are Republican or Democrat. I look for the diplomas and I'm looking for the diagnosis. And so this uprooting of people, I mean, these faceless and nameless people that keep us alive should never have to go through a political litmus test, right? for Democrat or Republican, they should say, hey, here are my qualifications. I can do your soil testing. I can do your food testing. I can do fire inspections at daycare centers, right? But if we add on top of that, that you have to pledge allegiance to a certain political party in order to then be hired, what does that workforce look like? And one of the things that I'll tell you that I know about bureaucrats might cause a longer line at the DMV, and we have to be patient, but I know the process is gonna work. When there were attempts to circumvent regulations that keep our air and water clean, it was the bureaucracy, it was the bureaucrats that stopped some very dangerous things in 2020 and 2021. So if you have an army or an allegiance of people that are gonna choose you versus right, when I hired Tempest, I didn't want her to just be an allegiance to me. I want her to do what's right and tell me when I'm wrong, right? That is a major component that could impact more than 220,000 federal jobs. And y'all know, because we're close to DC, that's a lot of Virginians who currently hold those jobs.
Can I pause for 1 second?
Sure can.
Yeah, because I want to make sure people really understand what you're saying. So we see the impact of this now by the Supreme Court. If you look at the fact that President Trump, one of the promises that he made when he ran for election the first time was that he would get Supreme Court justices on the bench, which would in turn, they would then vote for laws and shape laws based on a political position. That's the one thing that he did when he got in office. So now what you see is a Supreme Court that is largely influenced by a political appointee. So going a step further, if Project 2025 is enacted, then now it would not just be Supreme Court justices, it would be all government employees. You lose your jobs, and then now in order for you to get a job, you have to again lean toward a political appointee. So imagine if one party had all the power with jobs, with Supreme Court, with all of this stuff that's going on. Imagine where the country could go. That's really what we're talking about. And one thing you did not mention, and I know you're trying to be neutral here, but the authors of Project 2025 were who?
So when you, and this information is on their website, so again, I'm not spilling any tea. The authors of this document, whether it's the foreword or the actual words, because they're different parts of it, just like a book, right, are many of the previous governmental executive branch officials that served under President Trump. And so they know exactly what didn't go according to their plan the first time in order to make those adjustments so that it will go according to plan the next time. Then you have those religious leaders. Then you have the current candidate for vice president, J.D. Vance. He wrote one of the forewords. And so an important lesson of don't listen to our words, but look at our actions, you can see, because no matter who's trying to distance themselves from this now because it's become increasingly unpopular, 40 people from the executive branch under President Trump had direct hands on writing this document. Now, interestingly enough, not all 40 have said that they're going to vote for him, but they were involved. And so this is a very interesting thing to study in their own words.
And I think that's one of the reasons why people are concerned, right? Because once you, listen, you know, in our country, power rules. And I think, you know, I was having this conversation with somebody earlier today. The lesson of power is whoever has it is going to do whatever they can to keep it. And so if you create situations where you are enabled with more power, then you're going to be able to do more things, and you're going to fight for all you can to keep it. That's the reality of what potentially this document can do.
That's what he said, right?
Right.
When he said you only got to vote this once. Because it's the last time, right? What does that mean? Well, it's in the document. Exactly what they mean. But
Yes. And so that's one example. Now, you
Right.
mentioned 3 things, right? So I didn't want to interrupt
No,
your train of
and the
thought.
last one is literally the laws that need to change, the policy part, the laws that need to change in order to get this done. And that's how the 3 branches come together. So that's the main crux of the 3. Now, we can jump into any of the content, but I want to know who I'm talking to first. Can I ask a couple
Sure.
of questions? Okay. So I'm not giving out any grades. So if y'all don't get it, there's no judgment. I just need to know where we are on our civics knowledge and where we are with some of our thoughts, okay? So if I asked you to define for me what is unconstitutional, is there a brave soul that will come to the microphone and give it a try? Because this is a non-judgmental zone. What is the definition in our government for what is unconstitutional? Somebody at least try, because somebody get it started, Carlos. Get it started.
Okay, Carlos Hunter, unconstitutional would mean anything that goes against a person's right for liberty, life, and justice, or anything that goes against not the Constitution, but
No.
the rights of
No, the Constitution. Yeah, from the preamble
Bill
to
of
all
Rights.
the amendments, right? And
Yes.
the Bill of Rights, all of that, right? Thank you. See, everybody should. It's a no judgment zone.
Good job, Carlos.
Now, Carlos gave y'all the Schoolhouse Rock answer because that's what we were taught. The answer is anything that the Supreme Court says is unconstitutional is unconstitutional. Even if we are looking at the words in the Constitution and know that it's different. We know that the founders of the Constitution didn't give no president any immunity. But guess who has it now? Because the Supreme Court said so. Okay. When does early voting begin? September 20th. September 20th. Okay. What are some ways that foreign entities can interfere within our U.S. elections? Come on up to the mic. There are no wrong answers because it's a non-judgmental zone.
Hello? Okay. Donnell Howard. There are many ways that foreign entities can interfere with our elections. One is by introducing foreign money, getting involved in our internet, hacking our systems.
Say more. Okay, so you're talking about actually hacking the systems.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, and they have done that.
They have
And
ransomware, all of that.
All of that. AI.
Say more about AI for
and
artificial intelligence.
Intelligence.
But how for AI? Do you know?
Misinformation. Misinformation.
Okay.
Fake news.
Exactly.
Can I speak to that?
Yeah.
Thank you, Donnie. I appreciate
All right.
that. So it was on the news today that the Department of Justice intercepted over 30 Russian fake websites that's already being spread out. And what they're doing is they're cloning real websites to give it an authentic look. And even the font and everything looks exactly the same as wherever else you go. But the articles are giving disinformation. And they found 30 of them today.
So I'll add to that because that's today's news. What we also know in briefings from the 2020 election is that the Russian bots with their AI can do deep fakes where there's a video up there that looks like it's me, sounds like it's me, it's not me, right? They were also targeting Black voters. So Russian interference targeting Black voters. That's a little scary, but guess how we stay safe? If you see something that looks like, that ain't right, it probably isn't. And if you see anything that says me saying that it's something that you don't think I should be saying, call me, right? But a lot of it is They're banking on you not coming to conversations like this. They're banking on you doing quick shares, quick likes, quick everything, and not fact-checking. Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, none of them are going to stop the Russian interference. So this is a self-preservation thing that the Black community will have to do. If you have a question, the answer is at your trusted sources. So if you were to get a mailer tomorrow that says, early voting has actually been shrunk into just 1 week now, don't show up on the 20th, don't worry about it, we got you, you can vote early on the 4th of November, right? I hope that the hairs on the back of your neck are standing up because that don't sound right. Well, you can call the elections office or your voter registrar as a trusted source of information. And we have to do that for each other because unfortunately in the last 3 election cycles, there have been mailers that lied, that were targeting Black and poor communities. There were mailers that gave wrong dates of information, even in an accident. It was an actual accident, but and there were mailers that gave the wrong address for where you should return your voter registration form. So what we have to do is know what's a trusted source and only use those sources. Now, I love my progressive folks, but if they send you an application, don't use it. Please go to the voter website from Richmond, elections.virginia.gov. Please only use that for any forms or your local voter registrar website because that is the trusted source of information. The other thing that they're doing is hoping that some of the comments on social media will keep us tied up arguing with strangers instead of doing what we know we should, which is registering voters, talking to our family. So these Twitter finger conversations, I will never argue with a stranger. I'm just not doing it. But a lot of them have been caught. There was an elected official in Oklahoma. So there are these apps that you can have where you can have multiple Twitter accounts and just kind of bounce back and forth. I used to use TweetDeck. Well, he forgot to switch, and he tweeted out a tweet like it was from a Black woman, but accidentally used his official account, not the fake Black woman account that he had been tweeting from all week. So when you slip up, you get caught. So now we know what they're doing. So every picture of a Black person that's telling you that a certain candidate has a Black scent or change, because we don't know what code switching is, right? Or is not really Black enough. A lot of those Black people saying that are not Black people. They are Russian bots. And so if you mind your Black job and your Black business and take care of your Black community, them Russians can't invade, right? But they're hoping that you don't have the information or the direct connection to the trusted sources so that their tricks will work.
And again, we have to ask ourselves an important question. Why are so many people coming after the Black vote? Because it has power. I cannot emphasize that to you all enough. It really has power. Do you understand how Virginia wins? Virginia won Democrat in the last election. You had the majority of the counties, the rural areas, voted Republican overwhelmingly. The only reason why Virginia won Democrat was because of Hampton Roads, Richmond, and Northern Virginia. Who lives in those areas? And so when we decide to show up to vote, we influence and impact elections. It's that simple. When we don't show up, we also impact elections, but in a negative way. And so given that, I want to go back to 2025 because part of that, you want to say with it?
Y'all have a superpower. Don't forget, the entire January 6th event was because Black folks showed up to vote in Georgia. Like, y'all have a superpower. That's why they're trying to take it from you. So Georgia, Virginia, wherever, the Black vote is what they're spending money to come after.
Which is in part why I believe this was created, right? Project 2025. And so there are many different areas, and again, it's a 900-page document. Obviously, we can't go through all of it tonight, but I will highlight some of the areas of which Project 2025 does target, which impacts us. Civil rights, your ability to vote, is in Project 2025. Economic opportunities, whether for you to have a personal job or for you to start a business, is impacted in 2025. Educational policies, how our kids are going to be educated. What will our school systems look like? They want to do away with the Secretary of Education, the whole Department of Education. Now, if you already know how schools are now, imagine if there's no Department of Education at all. That's in Project 2025. Healthcare is in Project 2025, or the access to it. And you all understand that for us, we lag behind severely when it comes to access of healthcare. It is not that the reason why there's disparaging rates between us and others when it comes to cancers and hypertension and high blood pressure, yes, there are certain factors in our society that play a part of that, but there's also other reasons. And one of the main reasons is we don't have as many access to primary health care as other ethnic groups. So by the time we do go, in many cases, it's too late. So think about that part of it. If they're going to even limit even further the access to health care, what does that mean for you? What does that mean for your family? What is also in here is the criminal justice reform. Now, we already know that everything that I have mentioned so far is stacked against our community when it comes to these issues. So with criminal justice reform, it's not going to make it better. It will make it in some ways even more challenging in how we are operating in that system. Environmental justice, this is something that we don't always talk about. But right here in the Southeast Newport News community, there's an environmental issue, and it has been for years. You know what it is? It's the coal at the shipyard. And because the coal is right there down the street, there's a higher asthma rate in this community than other parts of the city because the coal is right there, and then the wind blows, and then kids are playing outside in the streets and all of that. And our kids are much more likely to develop asthma. But all of that, again, is in Project 2025. So I've given you a few of these areas, right? Do you want to touch on any of these and how it directly impacts the Black community?
Yes. So within law enforcement, a lot of folks will go back to George Floyd and think of the uprisings of summer 2020, but we don't have to go back that far. We can go back to Sonia Massey and understand that when you rebuke the devil will shoot you. And very soon before that occurred, the writers and supporters of Project 2025 would like to give more immunity to our law enforcement officers. And so that would not only be a slap in the face to the little bit of reforms that we've gotten since 2020, it would set us back. A lot of us already have civil immunity, which makes it very hard to sue. But that gentleman was charged with murder because it was. That charge, much less an actual conviction, would not have been possible if there was more immunity. So when we're thinking about the courts and what we think justice is, we just worked on barrier crimes in order to allow for people who have been justice and court involved to be able to get more jobs, those second chances. Second chances would be almost unheard of when you come to the ways in which they talk about people who have previous criminal records. Now, a lot of us are still working age, and so this part really kind of gets me. But right now, we are set to have an increase in income threshold to about $58,000. So everybody that makes about $58,000 or below will have overtime protection. They want to erase that threshold or push it back significantly, which means 4.3 million people in our nation would lose overtime protection. They also are playing with the idea of changing our 5-day work week into hours. So 180 hours at the boss's discretion, as opposed to what labor unions, and what we just celebrated on Labor Day, what labor unions have fought for to include workforce safety, workplace safety. You know, we have the shipyard, we have all kinds of dangerous jobs in the area, but we have a lot of things in place for workplace safety. The other thing that when we think about the nuclear family and conservative and traditional. I want to be very clear that the Christian value of hard work, I think it's a wonderful thing. I'm not necessarily that big on the capitalism part, but I'm real good with hard work, right? So I'm not trying to give, vacations to everybody or whatever. Paid family medical leave, that's separate, right? So I don't want people to think that I'm being flippant with this. But in order to take care of your family, you have to come home from work, right? You want the job to end, then you get rest, then you take care of your work. That shouldn't be revolutionary. But the fact that you could lose your job if you don't stay and work overtime and not get paid the overtime means that you're giving up time for your family and not gaining anything extra, right? So that's exploitive. It also rolls back the workplace. This is so bizarre to me. Everything that we've done for civil rights so that you have an office of equal opportunity. Racial discrimination would be legalized in many forms because one of the visions of this plan is to be a raceless society. So even though we have health, justice, economic, and even just being able to walk down the street differences from our white peers, in a race-based society, which is what we have now, those disparities can be measured. If I walk in as a Black woman and I have high blood pressure, they know, okay, we know Black women's mortality rate is higher when they're pregnant, delivering, or within 1 year of delivering. We know that because the data is taken. So they're not saying, oh, we're racist. No, they're just saying, let's just stop taking the racial data. So then all of the things that we know to exist as disparities today would just go into the average of every American. And so when we have grants for Black businesses, when we have Pell grants for certain income levels, when we have HBCUs, which do not, only bring in Black students, but there are things that we have fought hard for to get even a semblance of equality. They're not just gonna come and snatch it, they're just gonna take the data away. So we don't know how many Black women are dying because of lack of health care. We don't know how many Black men are dying because of prostate cancer. We just know people are dying, and the numbers will get smaller because we'll get shifted into their average. So this is what we're saying with intersectionality, right? There's gonna be something in these 900 pages that y'all gonna like, I'm sure. Because especially when you look at the way that it's worded, it sounds real great. Like, we're just gonna do away with divisive data. We're gonna do away with the divisions within our community and all live together. And then you realize, oh, that means more Black people are gonna die. And they're hoping that you can't see through those lines because they're not gonna write down, I hate Black people, right? Under Project 2025, they legally could, but that's not what they put in here. So gun violence prevention, right? We had a school shooting today in Georgia. The current administration is the first ever administration that had a White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention. That's all the way in DC. Let me tell you what it means for Newport News, Virginia. There's a program, a conglomerate, Victor, that is doing street teams and gun violence prevention in our schools and our streets right now with dollars that came straight from the White House. When you don't believe that there is a gun violence problem and your answer is more guns, will you fund gun violence prevention or not? So that's something for Newport News that we can think through, right? Like I told y'all, I think we should feed our kids. If we make them go to school, I think food should be free at school, right? But apparently we should make it harder for families to get benefits by either increasing the application or increasing eligibility clauses. We just clawed those back. When we were looking at education, not only eliminating the Department of Education, eliminating Head Start. The entire purpose of Head Start for those 1 million babies are because we know that whatever their life circumstances are not their fault. But they need a little help to get on grade level before they even start. That's why it's called Head Start. Take that away from those 1 million babies, and they end up in the same classrooms, but without the preparation, right? lessening access to student loans and grants. And then here's one, attacking and demonizing our college and university institutions as liberal bastions, because that's where I, the childless cat lady, learned that ours was free. When I went to Spelman College, I learned I was free. How dare I, right? And I'm being flippant, but I'm not. The entire premise of what I learned at the 3 HBCUs from where I hold degrees is the power and promise that I bring to any table that I show up. But that's a threat. If you know that you deserve better than this document, you're a threat. If you know better than to read, just their words and to read and be critically engaged with information like you do other documents, then you're a threat. So let's attack the universities that we know during the civil rights we fought so hard to sit in because we weren't even allowed. Some of the people that integrated Virginia public schools and colleges are still alive, right? Closing that access and then also telling them they can't teach Black history, as if our story is not part of American history, and changing the words of what MLK said so that we would all be reading from the same sheet of raceless music. Where does that future lead? One more.
Yeah.
Any veterans in the house? Oh, y'all got veterans, okay. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the easiest, how easy is it for you to get your rightful benefits that are owed to you as veterans? It's easy? Oh, Lord, the people calling me is not telling me 10. Anybody say less than 10? Okay. So then imagine you're a disabled veteran, where Black veterans are already getting less and less approved for up to 100% disability, even when they have the same ailments as others, right? They're going to cut the number of health conditions that would allow for you to apply for disability. Now, I can't go back in time and have you not fight that war you fought. I can't make you an unveteran. You've already paid that. You've already given that to our country for us to have these free discussions. How dare we then try to say we're going to give you less after you've already given that service? At the same time, fighting enrichment in order to get the surviving spouses and children's education to those same universities that they don't want to pay to teach Black history, giving scholarships at higher rates to white survivors of those that were killed in the line of duty. That's just the tip of the iceberg, but I'm gonna stop to see if you have anything.
Yeah, and so, again, there's so much in this document. It's really difficult to unpack it all tonight. So here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna ask you one last question, and then we'll have question and answer. So as I ask this last question, if you have a question for Delegate Price, you can start making your way up. We'll form lines on both sides. Again, state your name and quickly ask your question. We'll try to do what's called rapid fire. We do this on the radio where we just try to answer as many questions as we can to make sure you all have what you need. So if you have a question, you can start making your way up to the mic. My last question to you is, we're in a church. So what should we as Christians, what should we as a church body be thinking about, be doing, considering as it relates to Project 2025?
I think that's an excellent question, because when you leave this building, you're a civilian, you're an employee, you're a mother, you're a father. Our identities don't just start and begin as Christian. And so one of the things that the great philosopher Audre Lorde said, and I'm paraphrasing, we do not have the luxury to live we do not have the luxury to be single issue voters because we do not lead single issue lives. What I think the Black Christian, specifically Black Christians, should be doing is looking at the intersection of your own Christian beliefs and the impact of the other identities you have within this document. I'll give you an example. I had a intense conversation, but it was respectful, There are some Christians that are loving the idea that the 10 Commandments are going up in classrooms because entering prayer back into school is their belief in how to get some of these kids to act better, right? And that could be part of it, because that's part of, the plan, introducing Christian values and Christian principles in there. But what if those Christian values and Christian principles are white Christian nationalist principles and values instead of what you thought you meant by them 10 commandments, right? So then you start to have to navigate, okay, I'm a Christian, but I'm still a black woman, right? I still need bodily autonomy in order to get the health care I need and deserve in order to save my own life. I still should be able to be safe going into a working environment and not slip on the floor and just be out of luck. I still have to make sure my children are fed. I still want to be able to vote. So I would just ask that as you identify as Christian, you take into account all of your other identities and how policies play, and then do your research on the candidate. And there's 2 apps that I've listed, nonpartisan apps. My Balbo, you can go in and you can interact with people from all over the political spectrum. It's a tool for political engagement. ActiVote will actually ask you questions. Maybe you never thought, am I a liberal or a progressive when it comes to political sense? You can actually take a quiz to see where you fall on the spectrum. And then you do your research, see, okay, I care about education. I care about disability for veterans. I care about healthcare and prescription drug prices. I actually have a wonderful life, so I care about what the life will be for my grandkids, right? Any of those things. And that's where you start doing, okay, well, what does this person believe? What does this person believe? What is this document? What is this document? And then when you get to your candidates, please do not try to get to 100% with any candidate. We are not a cult, right? So we're allowed to disagree. But if you have a candidate that you got to about 80% with, that's your person. Even 60%, that's your person, because you're looking at these larger issues. And if you don't have something that moves you or motivates you or brings you passion, think about the most disadvantaged person you know and vote on their behalf. Our babies can't vote. Our babies need public education. Vote for them. But there has to be something that you find other than a politician's flyer that gets you to the polls within all of your identities as you sit right now.
That's good right there. That's real good. So we're going to go ahead and do the question and answer. Go ahead, state your name and question, please.
Okay. Tim Orr. In regards to the strategic plan of the 3 branches coming underneath one party, my question is, what happens if there's a change in the party? Do people lose their jobs and then you start back over from scratch, or how does that work?
That is the perfect question, and lets me know that you're thinking in the right ways. Because you know what? A lot of folks that wrote this document do not ever expect for the pendulum to swing back. Mm-hmm. So when the Supreme Court told former President Trump that he had immunity within his official presidential duties, a lot of us were like, all right, Biden, come on, what you gonna do? Because you got it too. And they weren't expecting us to have that conversation. But the expectation that the system will still be the same when the pendulum swings is where you have to investigate. They're not banking on a change in political philosophy within our lifetimes. If they are able to enact this plan, this will be our country, a dictatorship for the foreseeable future. And so they don't have to think that far because of the fail-safes that they have, but that is the right direction that we should be thinking. And that's why a lot of us, partisan as I am, I want elections to be fair, because I know that pendulum can swing right back on me.
Thank
you. Thank you, Tim. Mother Evans.
Hello, my name is Darlene Evans. My daughter has been on the prayer list for a long time. She inherited bad knees that runs in my family. I have 2 artificial ones and other artificial shoulders and stuff like that. My son nicknamed me the Bionic Woman.
Okay.
But she was getting ready to have her surgery this year. But all of a sudden, she was making, I think, $60 or $80 too much, and they took all of her medical benefits away. She has no, what can she do about that?
So I am going to direct you to Tempest right behind you to talk about the specifics with the situation with your daughter, but I'm going to answer your question in a very general sense. When it comes to Project 2025, on page 463, that is where they outline rolling back the progress that we made under the Affordable Care Act. And one of the things with the Affordable Care Act, if you'll remember, was pre-existing conditions. So when you said born with bad knees, her being born was a pre-existing condition. And I'm really answering your question in a general sense because I want you to be able to talk with your private information with us so that we can help you on your specific case. But when it comes to Project 2025, making it harder to access Medicaid and Medicare, while also undermining what Medicare and Medicaid can do in order to keep costs down for people, that's in between page 460 and 465.
Thank you.
But I'd love for you to talk to Tempest.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Yes, Donnell Howard. I don't have a question. I just have a quick comment. Project 2025 has already started. The Louisiana Supreme Court has came out and said it is okay for companies to pollute and target black neighborhoods to ruin our air, our water, and our soil. Yeah. So it's already started. And we, as black people, need to wake up and see what's going on. So yeah. I just want to make that comment.
Just imagine whatever you think has already started be exponentially and efficiently worse.
100%. Carlos.
So it's kind of a compound question. First thing is, I believe Donald Trump and his folk are already setting up to contest this election. So the Supreme Court does what they do, and we know that they're kind of on their own thing. What can we do to hold them accountable? Is there anything in the works with, because I heard Justice Ketanji Brown was saying that she's open to putting some sort of regulations, enforceable regulations on themselves, well, on herself. So does that open the door for something? And what can we do to put pressure to get that done?
So are you speaking specific to campaign finance violations of the Supreme Court or the actual election results and certification?
Campaign finance.
Okay. So so when we were talking about, unconstitutional being whatever the Supreme Court says it is, right? So the Supreme Court's word is final. That is happening under the backdrop of some of the Supreme Court members being caught having accepted expensive gifts, trips, and payoffs of loans that they didn't report, which kind of exposed that, well, you are a political figure if, you're going to get all of this paid in order to then do something. So then there was a ruling basically that said, well, if it happens after the action and not before, then it's not bribery. So you can get rewarded for a Supreme Court decision, just not bribed before. That is the court that we're dealing with. And so Representative AOC has put in some legislation that would pass and put on, as an elected official, I have to tell y'all who I work for, what stocks I own, and all of that would do that for them and be enforceable, but unfortunately it would never pass the current House. So as we are right now, it would have to be self-enforced honor system because of where we are right now. But elections matter, and the people that are playing a part in this, so if your issue is campaign finance, look up which are the presidential candidates and vice presidential candidates, which United States Senator, and which of your choices for congressional representative believe in campaign finance reform. And that would be something that you could mark as a check as one of your issues. If the House and the Senate and the president all had a majority that agreed that Supreme Court justices needed to be checked and balanced, then it could get passed and signed. And so that it underlies like why this election is so important, and again, another thing that's at stake.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
My name is Gary Preston. I'd like to first commend you and Pastor for having this dialogue on this evening. And I am a disabled veteran. It doesn't look like it. Lord has blessed me for all I have went through and been through. But my question is this, because you have a heart for disabled veterans. Why is this country spending millions and billions of dollars to support wars? However, we as veterans cannot get what we deserve. For example, Israel and other nations, and it took me 40 years just to get a small percentage. What can be done in that situation?
So the country is doing what it has been empowered to do, because the people that are making those decisions have not had to be held accountable for those decisions. And systemic racism is still alive and well. And a lot of those obstacles that you may have faced are not even legal. They're within the system.
Right.
So denied papers, lost papers, workers that just don't want to help people. There's a human element to this, right? So one of the things that I have recently seen, and you can take a look and see what's out there. There is one way that you can treat and support veterans, and then there's another way, whether they're dead or alive, in a cemetery or in a VA hospital. Right. You can look up and type in Virginia Senator VA benefits, and there will be a ton of news articles for what current Virginia senators are trying to do in order to help the VA system, the changes that were just made in Hampton. But again, a lot of the answers to these questions are, in order to make changes, there's a bill. A bill has to pass the House with a majority. A bill then has to pass the Senate with a majority. It then has to get signed by President. Right now, we have a hodgepodge system of smaller bills we were able to eke through under one administration or another, as opposed to an entire system working on behalf of our veterans. And so we can also talk offline, and I can tell you some of the local things that localities should be doing better as well, because it's a local, state, and federal. I would also encourage you to look up, and if you remind me after, we can give you this. There is a veterans task force at the state level where we hear directly from veterans what needs to be better in Virginia, because sometimes these problems, I don't go to DC, I go to Richmond, right? So I can send you to your representative on the federal level, but I also want to make change here in Virginia. What are some of the suggestions you have? What are some of the things? I'm not a veteran. So when I go vote for a bill, if I haven't heard from any of the veterans, I'm gonna think everything's A-okay. So if you haven't reached out to your representatives, become a part of local boards or state boards that deal with veterans issues, then your voice hasn't been heard. And that's for all of us. Your vote is not the end of your civic engagement, it's the beginning. So if you want your vision of what the future should look like to be in policies, and you haven't talked to any of the policy makers, y'all, we're not in the business of magic, right? So now I know that when I come to Ivy, I got veterans I have to answer to. That's good for me.
Thank you so much.
Got a couple more.
Hey, good evening. Thank you so much for this opportunity. This was really great information. So I had, my question actually goes to you as well as to Pastor. As we know, several parts of Project 2025 will dismantle or roll back the civil rights of certain groups of people. So my question is about Project 25, how are followers of Jesus Christ supposed to react to the parts of Project 2025 that appear to contradict the basic principles of Micah 6:8, such as to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly to all people, not just to a certain set of Christians like evangelicals. And in continuation of that, I just want to say, as I think about civil unrest, when people are angry with the elected officials and how masses respond when they are pressed to the breaking point, I am concerned about, and I think about Romans 13 that tells us to be obedient to the governing authorities that we fall under. And if Project 2025 is passed, it seems like the intent of the governing authorities is going to contradict those parts of the Bible, even though they're supposed to be, a Christian nationalism type focus.
So I'm gonna stay in my lane
Yeah.
and let him, but I do have something to say. But that's exactly what I'm saying, right? And that's why we don't proof text. And that's why we don't just say, okay, I'ma follow blindly whatever the government says, because we got the rest of the book that says, hold up, right? And so I would say, as the non-pastor on the stage, that is why I implore you to excavate your own hopes and visions for the future in your totality. Not just one page of the Bible or the other, but how you navigate this earth. You seem like a very passionate and compassionate person.
I work for the feds, so lucky me.
And we want you to have your job, right?
Girl, it's a black
So,
job.
Thank
I
you.
wanna keep it.
But the fact that's what I'm asking for when we have comprehensive dialogue about things. We can't just point to one page or another of any document, but the underlying hatefulness of the 900 pages for anything other than white man, white wife, white child, middle class.
Right. That serves them.
That serves their version of God.
Yeah.
None of y'all are in that vision, y'all. So some of us are claiming allegiance to a group that doesn't even consider us to be a member.
Well said, and I'll add to that, Lisa. This is why, for me as pastor, we have to be, again, kingdom-minded.
Right.
If you're more concerned about your party than Christ, then you got your priorities mixed up. And for us, even when there have been times where people have been in office, Darnell just mentioned it, it's already happening in some places. Scripture calls us to be wise as serpents, harmless as doves. The Lord said he will build his church and the gates of hell should not prevail against it. So even when there are things that are contrary in the world and the society that's happening, the Lord will always provide a means for us to look after others, to do just. And then there are times where we have to speak up. We have to have a call to action. And those are things that, if we're really standing on principle, on Christ, then if it comes to that, then those are the things we have to do. So if I had to say to y'all, look, we need to roll out and go to a city council meeting. We need to roll out and go to see Marcia at the state. Y'all better fill these buses up. Because again, what Marcia is saying to us is, it's one thing for us to get excited on election day and vote. And this is what's gonna happen, y'all. Y'all gonna start seeing in the next couple of weeks, because we're already getting phone calls, everybody gonna wanna come here. All the elected officials gonna wanna come here. If we don't hold them accountable beyond November the 5th, that's the issue that we're dealing with. So to answer your point, again, I go back, there have been times in the past where whoever's been in office has not been favorable to Christians. We're gonna be all right. We're gonna be all right. Thank you, Lisa. Go ahead.
See, y'all been real nice to me, and I think y'all are being way too hospitable, but there's somebody in this room that wants to know about two topics or has some thought about gay marriage and abortion. As a black Christian, you've had that thought, somebody in this room. And I want to put that out there for the type of work I'm asking you to do, right? I am not here to challenge your belief about what the Bible says. That's not why I'm here. But what I do want to ask you is, if there is a family that you don't consider to be within God's will, are you okay with them being jailed for it? Are you okay with that family being kicked out of their home, legally discriminated against because of it? And if you would not have a certain procedure, or you think a certain procedure is not right or of God, Are you willing to support a plan that removes the medicine for that abortion, which is the same medicine that could save your life if you have an ectopic pregnancy? And so this is the empathy, right? Because sometimes we just say, well, I don't believe in this and I don't believe in that. I'm not here about your beliefs. That's y'all's lane. But when we talk about policy and when we talk about 900 pages of legalized discrimination, today you may not be on that list. But how do you know you won't be on tomorrow's list? And that's the kind of empathy and comprehensive thought that I am asking for when it comes to the work that I do. And that type of, I'll say trans kids. Christians call me all the time mad about trans kids. First of all, less than 1% of the entire Newport News public schools identifies as trans kids. Y'all need to be looking at literacy rates of the not trans kids, right? But the Russian bots, the conservatives, and the people that want us in this room fighting about trans kids and bathrooms will keep us distracted while, please, in this room, raise your hand if you make less than $400,000. Your tax is about to go up while you worried about trans kids. You see what I mean? And so I'm just asking for us, have your beliefs. Have your beliefs. I'm not here to argue with you about your beliefs, but the impact of some of these policies, you have to decide, this is what I believe as a Christian. Am I willing for non-Christian things to happen to people with whom I disagree?
And that's a very interesting point. I do think that that's where the church has to evolve, in the sense of, if we believe, as Lisa just said, that we need to do justice, that means that there may be times where justice has to be served with a particular group that maybe we don't agree with, but it's still justice. And I think what historically we have done as a church is take a position and say it needs to be on the right side of how we see it, and that's it. But I think we all understand now that we live in a society that, family dynamics are very different today than they've ever been, especially in the Black community. And we have to take all that into consideration. Jay, last question.
Yes, Jay Grant. Thank you, Pastor Swann. Delegate Price, thanks for coming. So I'm a former federal employee, worked 10 years at HUD, U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. I came in, I was under the, I was a civilian employee. So I worked under different presidents, under George W., under the whole time under Obama, and a little bit under Trump. And what I remember when Trump came in, it took a while. He was his administration was very unorganized. And it was very, to use your words, Delegate Price, it was very interesting at the beginning, because we thought some things were gonna happen and nothing happened. And what we figured out later on was that it took about a year for him to even figure out that there was this thing called HUD. But when he found out, what he did was a witch hunt, not only at HUD, but also throughout the federal government. And there were things like, I remember he was looking for words like global warming. Let's take that. So, HUD is dealing with housing, but it's dealing with the environment as well. And so, as does many agencies. And so if there was a document that mentioned global warming, he looked for the authors of that document, and they disappeared. Not like from the face of the earth, but they left the organization. But it was mostly appointees. So while that was scary, it was technically legal, but that didn't always happen. So before, you would have appointees in these high positions that oftentimes would actually, not at the highest level, but oftentimes would, survive changes. So to me, that is very, I'm just kind of reiterating what you're saying. It's very alarming if that were to happen. So employees like me would potentially, and I'm just, somebody feeding my family, would potentially lose their job. So my question is simply a very simple question, just how realistic do you think it would be for these alarming 900 pages to actually be implemented?
So first, a couple of things. So a broken clock is right twice a day, right? So it was the Trump administration and Ben Carson that came down with that CNI 30 million for Newport News, right? But it was because of people that didn't have partisan ties that kept the trains moving in order for the grant process to go through, for Newport News to be able to apply and for that money to happen. And so then they just show up for the photo ops, right? So imagine if that goes away and the people that actually know the ins and outs of the housing industry for underserved communities went away. That's exactly, the type of thing that we're saying is at risk. The possibility of this actually coming to fruition is so real that I literally have sleep problems right now. I cannot stress to you what, I think it was Darnell, what the gentleman said before. This is already happening. So that's why we wanted to make sure that you knew. This didn't just start. This isn't an idea. This isn't an origination of a process. This is a playbook for how to get to the ultimate goal, okay? So we already have discrimination. We have a governor right now that if there's any word where it says equity within a law or something, he's wiping that out. So this is already happening. When we look at other states, a lot of this is happening at the state level. So I don't want anyone to leave here and think that this is just some dream or idea. These are concrete principles and checklists of actions to take in order to wreak havoc on our democracy as we know it today. So if anybody was thinking, oh, well, it might not happen because there are good people still in those jobs, they're getting rid of those good people, right? So then I would flip that and say, what would keep them from doing it? It wouldn't be Congress if Congress has a majority of pro-Project 2025. We already know where the current Supreme Court says. So all it would take is for them to do exactly what they're telling us to do within the executive branch by getting rid of people like you and getting in there. What would that take, like a month? So here's one last thing. Last time, this is straight out of their mouths, they didn't think he was gonna win. They really didn't. They were surprised he won. That's why it took him so long to find out there was a HUD. Yeah. This 900 pages is what they've been working on for January 20th of 2025 since then. This is not an idea, this is a plan.
Well said. Can we thank Delegate Price, please? She did a fantastic job. She'll be available to answer any individual questions before we go. Now, the charge is on us. We've been given the information, we've been challenged. We do have a social justice ministry here at the church. Reverend Callie, Reverend Person, and some others are kind of working in that regard. I'm going to give Reverend Callie just a few moments to speak on what we're going to do here as a church body, what things that we're focusing on leading up to the election and beyond. Reverend Callie.
Thank you, Pete, and thank you so much, Delegate Price. I have to say this, my why for where I am currently in my job and what I'm pursuing and empowered by is because Delegate Price gave me a chance one day and I was able to work under her as a community organizer right here in Newport News, so thank you, Delegate Price. So thank you and good evening. My name is Reverend Erica Calicut, affectionately known as Reverend Callie, and I am here to just kind of communicate and share the relaunch of our social justice ministry. So what you see here is a QR code. If you are interested in being a part of the social justice ministry after especially hearing what you've heard today, the work continues. This is a marathon, not a sprint. And so it's going to take all of us, just like we've seen in the social in the civil rights movement, this is an intergenerational movement. And so it's going to take all of us, all ages, all genders, everyone to be a part of this work. And really the mission is going to be grounded in being biblically centered, culturally relevant, and just increasing social awareness as well as political awareness and civic engagement. And so myself, along with Brother Reese Brinkley and whoever else is interested in co-leading or just being a part of it, we're going to, of course, be involved in issues such as voter education, criminal justice reform, environmental justice, housing justice, economic justice. The list will go on. And if there's something that you are interested in and you want to start another initiative around, I definitely ask that you would please find me. You can use your phones right now and go ahead and use your camera to hover over that. That will send you to our group me. And when we have our first interest meeting to get things restarted and back off the ground, we're going to make sure that we are educating, empowering, and mobilizing, like P said, on all levels. So that's local, that's school board, that's city council meetings, that's PTA meetings. That's also organizing a day for you all to come up to the General Assembly. I currently work in the Virginia House of Delegates with a delegate that represents a part of Norfolk and Chesapeake. And so I am happy to start to organize and help you all get connected to who your elected officials are and making sure that you know not only your local elected officials, but also your state delegates and your state senators all the way to your congressional district and your Senate district. So please see me after this concludes, and I'll be happy to kind of share more information about how you can get involved. Thanks, P.
Thank you. All right, repeat after me, please. I am more powerful than I think. Why do I say that tonight? She gave you 2 pieces of paper. On those pieces of paper, she gave you reputable sources to go do your work now. Everything is listed. If you just came tonight to hear and then you don't take those pieces of paper and you actually do the homework, then really you shouldn't have come. You shouldn't have come. But you use your power when you get knowledge. And now you have the ability to gain more knowledge and insight, so you have homework to do this week. Go look at those links, do the research, and then make your decision. I think it's pretty clear, though, what decision we need to make, but you make your decision on what you think is best for you and your family. So don't lose those 2 pages. You want to say anything else about those pages before we go? One page, I'm sorry. What was the other page? Oh, it's front and back. Because you showed me 2. I'm sorry. Y'all got 1 page. And you got 1 job. That's right. Handle your business. All right, let's all stand, please. I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. And again, Delegate Price will answer any questions. Tempest, thank you also for being here, and Mother Price as well. God, thank you for this time tonight. I pray, God, we've been enlightened and educated on these issues, and now, God, let us do the work of educating ourselves, and you giving us wisdom and discernment of how to move forward individually and collectively. And we do pray for our nation as we enter into this election season, that it will be a season of peace and not turmoil and craziness, and God, a time where you would rise up above everything else. So thank you for this time tonight. In Jesus' name, amen. Love y'all. Have a great night, everybody. So there is voter registration tonight for those who do want to be able to register. All right. Thank you so much.